All right, today we are going on a serious deep dive. We're going to pull back the curtain on our whole economic system and really look at the philosophical wiring underneath it all. And what we're going to find is, well, it's kind of like an error in reality. A fundamental flip, an inversion in Western thought that has literally shaped everything, from how we think about God all the way to how we think about money.
So it all kicks off with a really simple question. Think about a dollar bill, maybe one in your wallet right now. It's just a piece of paper with some ink on it, right? So what actually gives it value? Is it the government saying it's worth something? The gold it used to represent? Or is it something else entirely? You see, this one little question cracks open a much bigger conversation about where value even comes from in the first place.
Okay, so here's the game plan for this whole explainer. First, we'll look at a shared blind spot in economics. Then, we'll trace the story of money to uncover a hidden philosophical rule. From there, we'll see how that rule turned a divine debt into a modern contract. And finally, we'll peek into what might be capitalism's final frontier. Let's get into it.
All right, let's dive into Section 1. Now, this might sound a little crazy, but what if I told you that from a certain philosophical viewpoint, capitalism and its biggest critic, Marxism, aren't really polar opposites? In fact, you could argue they're built on the very same foundation.
Yeah, at their absolute core, both of these systems are obsessed with one single thing: producing value. It doesn't matter if you're the capitalist or the worker, the name of the game is always creating more of it. The source material we're looking at has a name for this: value productivism. Think about it. They argue endlessly about who gets to keep the value, but they both agree on the fundamental goal of making it. And it's right there, at that shared starting point, where our whole critique really begins.
And of course, you can't talk about value without talking about money. They're totally inseparable. But here's the thing. What money is, well, that's changed dramatically over the years. It's become less and less real.
So this timeline really shows money's journey into pure abstraction. I mean, it started out as a physical thing, a commodity, right? Like gold or silver. Then it shifted. Its value became guaranteed by a state's credit. And even more recently, you've got this school of thought, modern monetary theory, or MMT, that argues its real value comes from the fact that you need it to pay your taxes. And now, we're heading into a whole new world where value might be guaranteed by nothing more than an algorithm, with crypto or these new central bank digital currencies.
So here's the really crucial takeaway. Money has basically shed its physical body. It isn't gold anymore. It's not even really the paper in your wallet. For all intents and purposes, modern money is just information. It's a number on a digital ledger, a completely abstract concept that has value simply because we all agree it does. And you have to grasp this abstraction because it's the key to understanding the huge philosophical shift that's going on underneath everything.
Okay, and that brings us right to the intellectual heart of this whole thing. The reason our idea of value was able to become so abstract, so disconnected from reality, is because of a hidden rule, a really deep-seated habit of mind in Western thought that basically turns reality completely on its head.
It's a concept called the existence of inversion. And here's what it means. It's a way of thinking where an ideal, what ought to be, becomes more real, more powerful than what actually is. The ideal doesn't just describe reality anymore, it completely overwrites it. So the raw, simple fact that you exist gets pushed aside by a rule about what your existence should be.
To make this even clear, let's borrow a couple of German philosophical terms. Don't worry, they're pretty straightforward. First, you have Sein, pronounced Sein. This just means what is. It's the factual reality, things as they actually are. Then you have Sollen, pronounced Sollen. This means what ought to be. It's the ideal, the rule, the law. So this great inversion we're talking about is simply the process where Sollen, the ideal, becomes so powerful that it completely dominates and even erases Sein, the fact. The ought to be becomes the new is.
And believe me, this isn't just some abstract philosophical game. This inversion actually shapes our very sense of who we are. Now, this diagram looks a little complex, I know, but it shows us exactly how. Down at the bottom, you've got An sich. That's basically our raw factual being. It's the what is of us. But as we move up and interact with the world, with society, language, all the rules, we build a self-conscious I, which is represented here as Fürsic. This I is constructed from the outside in. It's shaped by a world of ideals and expectations, basically the world of Solon. So our identity, who we think we are, becomes a product of the ought, not just the is.
So the big question is, how did this philosophical flip-flop become the core logic of capitalism? Well, to understand that, we have to trace its history. And the story doesn't begin in a marketplace. It begins in a church.
Okay, here's how it unfolded step by step. It all started with a Christian worldview, where your very existence, your sign, is flipped into a debt you owe to God. That's the Solon. The simple logic is, you exist, therefore you owe. So how do you pay it back? Well, the New Testament gives an answer, through neighborly love. But then, as society became more secular, especially around the Enlightenment, this idea of neighborly love got transformed into the capitalist ethic. Suddenly, being productive and working hard was seen as the ultimate social good. And eventually, the system became so powerful, so autonomous, that it completely forgot where it came from. The original debt to God just vanished. And all that was left was the cold, impersonal logic of the contract, a pure system of economic debts and credits.
You know, it's a bit like a relationship that starts with genuine love and gratitude, but over time it just morphs into a cold, impersonal business contract. The original feeling is totally gone. All that matters now is fulfilling the terms. That warm human connection gets replaced by a purely transactional one. And that is exactly what happened to our idea of social obligation.
Which brings us right up to today, and the really unsettling future this logic seems to be creating. I mean, what happens when this system gets so advanced that it doesn't need its founding myth anymore? Or, even scarier, what happens when it doesn't even need us, its human participants? So the next huge leap seems to be the elimination of time itself from the equation. Think about it. With digital currencies, the delay, the time lag between an investment and its return can shrink to almost zero. Things happen instantly. This breaks a lot of old models. For example, central bank policies often rely on the time it takes for an interest rate change to slowly ripple through the economy. In a zero-lag world, those tools just don't work the same way. The whole system just gets faster, more efficient, and way more automated.
And in this new zero-lag economy, the consequences are, well, they're profound. Capital can start to reproduce itself without any need for human labor. Foundational economic ideas like the labor theory of value, they just kind of fall apart. The system becomes this self-contained, self-referential loop of pure information. And we humans, we become an externality. We're no longer essential for it to run. And, as you can probably guess, AI and automation are hitting the accelerator on this whole process.
And so this brings us all the way back to the question we started with, but now it has a pretty chilling twist. We began by asking, what gives a simple piece of paper its value? But maybe the real question that this centuries-long philosophical inversion forces us to face is this. In an economic system that's rapidly evolving to the point where it can operate without us, what gives us our value?